A vampire soulmate romance written by Clara Nightshade. Prologue. She died once, and awakened in the arms of the vampire who doomed her. Clara never believed in destiny until a tragic accident stole her memories and returned her with visions of fire, shadow, and blood. Haunted by a past she can't recall and drawn to a stranger she shouldn't trust, Clara begins to unravel a forgotten bond with Lucien, the ancient vampire king once cursed to destroy her. Lucien has ruled the dark for centuries, his soul burned by guilt, his heart locked in ice. But when Clara reappears alive, radiant, and carrying the spark of the ancient flame, his world fractures. She's not just a girl from the past, she's his soulmate. His undoing. His only salvation. As war brews between vampire clans and an ancient prophecy stirs, Clara and Lucien must confront what fate has written in blood, that some love stories were never meant to end, and some flames, once lit, refuse to die. Chapter 1: The Rebirth. They say death brings peace. Whoever coined that phrase clearly hadn't tried waking up in someone else's body, least of all a 6-year-old American girl with bandages wrapped around her skull like a forgotten Christmas present. I didn't open my eyes at first. The air smelled like sterile lemon cleaner and rust. Hospitals. Familiar in a former life sort of way. But the silence that was new. Death was supposed to be silent. This felt like suspense. I blinked once, and the light stabbed through my retinas with the kind of cruelty only fluorescent lighting can manage. Shadows danced in my peripheral vision, and for a brief second, I thought I was back in the palliative wing, surrounded by whispering nurses and the haunting click of morphine drips. But then a shape shifted closer, blocking the light with a body I did not recognize. "Leora," a man's voice said gently. Gravelly, comforting, like he was trying to wake a frightened kitten and not, well, whatever I was now. "You're safe. You're Ravenwood General." Leora. That wasn't my name. Except. Apparently, now it was. I tried to speak, but my throat burned like some paper in rebellion. My voice came out in a hoarse whisper, unpracticed in this child's mouth. "Not. Leora." The man smiled in a way that made my heart ache, though I had no memory of him. "You've been through a lot. But you're home now." Home? I didn't even know what continent I was on. In my past life, my real life, I was 32, Turkish American, plagued by chronic illness, and mostly alone. My greatest excitement had been swapping letters with a strange pen pal who wrote with purple ink and a flair for melodrama. He'd signed every letter C, and his words had been my escape. He described colors like a blind man longing to see. I thought he was a prisoner, maybe a romantic, or maybe a lunatic, and now here I was, trapped in the fragile body of a child who had apparently survived a car crash, with no memory of her family, her life, or how I ended up in her place. Lucky me. The man, he introduced himself as Chief Dean Rourke, a title that sounded more like a cowboy than a foster parent said at my bedside. His face bore the kind of wear that comes from years of watching people lie, run, or die. But his eyes were kind. He didn't flinch when I asked, "Am I dead?" "No, sweetheart. You're alive," he said, "and we're going to take good care of you. You're with family now." He didn't understand the irony. I was very much dead. They released me from the hospital a week later. Apparently, my recovery had been nothing short of miraculous, though I refused to call it that. If they knew the truth, they'd probably think I was cursed. Or possessed. Which, for the record, I wasn't. Just misplaced. Ravenwood turned out to be exactly the kind of town you'd expect to find in a murder mystery podcast. Pine trees taller than most city buildings, fog that rolled in like gossip, and people who smiled too much to be trusted. My new room had pale green walls and a wooden bookshelf already lined with stories I hadn't read. There was a photo of me on the desk, Leora, smiling with chipped teeth and a crooked braid, sitting beside a girl who looked like she belonged in a Victorian painting. Cousin Eleanor. Too quiet, too watchful. I didn't trust her either. Dean Rourke treated me like a wounded bird. He made grilled cheese, sandwiches, and offered bedtime stories like I was 6 and not an ex-philosophy major trapped in a child's skin. But the strangest part wasn't the domestic normalcy. It was the fact that I could see things. Not or saw spirits' truths. Subtle glimmers around people when they lied. A hum in my skull when someone concealed their intentions. And then there were the letters. The first one came 2 days after I returned home. No return address. Just a creamy envelope with a seal I didn't recognize and the familiar scrawl of my pen pal. "See, dearest Leora, You've crossed again, haven't you? I felt it the moment your name disappeared from the veil. The colors they returned, if only faintly. You're closer than you've ever been. Please write back. You promised, remember? Yours, eternally. See, my fingers trembled as I held the letter. I hadn't told anyone about him. And yet, he knew. Somehow he knew. That night, I dreamed of blood, not mine. The forest was soaked in it, the trees howling with wind that carried whispers I couldn't understand. Anne stood in the clearing. Pale, elegant, and dripping with the kind of danger you couldn't teach. He didn't speak, but his voice echoed in my skull. You're mine, Leora. I woke with a scream caught in my throat. The next morning, Ravenwood was draped in fog thick enough to suffocate a secret. I sat by the window, fingers curled around a chipped ceramic mug filled with warm milk because coffee stunts growth and apparently I needed to stay 6 forever. My mind still throbbed from the dream or whatever it was. Visions like that didn't belong to dreams. They belonged to prophecies or deranged vampire soap operas. I wasn't sure which was worse. Chief Rourke called through the hallway. Leora, you ready to meet the Ashbournes? Ah, yes. The town's golden family. Ravenwood's unofficial royalty, with a name that sounded like it had a crest and tragic legacy stitched into every syllable. I'd overheard whispers at the hospital how Drive. Silas Ashbourne had helped stabilize me after the crash, how his family had taken in children before, and how everyone adored them with the quiet fear reserved for things just a bit too perfect. I brushed my hair, which remained distressingly static, and forced a crooked smile in the mirror. You've died once already, I muttered. What's the worst they could do? The Ashbourne estate sat nestled in the forest like a Gothic painting someone accidentally left in a fairy tale. Ivy dripped from stone columns, and the front gate creaked as we approached. Chief Rourke parked with a reverent kind of quiet, like we were visiting a church. I slid out of the car, the hem of my dress catching in the wind, and caught my first glimpse of them. Silas Ashbourne stood on the porch, all white coat and calm gravity, like if Gregory House had read too much Rumi. Behind him was Mira, warm and composed, her hands folded like a woman forever prepared to serve super secrets. Further back were silhouettes, a girl with hair like ink and eyes too old for her face, Arya. I would learn later. A tall, silent boy who didn't blink enough, Elias. A couple of others hung back, shadowy and beautiful, like perfume ads come to life. Silas stepped forward. Leora. He knelt, his voice low and melodic. I'm so glad to meet you properly. I squinted at him. You were there when I woke up, weren't you? A pause. Just long enough to mean something. In a way. My head tilted. That's not ominous at all. Mira chuckled softly. She's sharp, Dean. I noticed, the chief replied dryly. We were ushered inside with a gentleness that felt strategic. The Ashbournes moved like predators trying very hard to play house pets. Their home was absurd: high ceilings, fireplaces that burned even in July, portraits that seemed to blink when you weren't looking. At lunch, Mira served me dumplings with a side of motherly affection. I remembered you liked these, she said with a smile. Did I? You told me, she said simply. I blinked. I most certainly had not. After the meal, Arya cornered me near the piano. You're not afraid of us, she said, examining me like a painting that refused to stay still. Should I be? I asked. Her smile was too serene for her age. Most people feel something. The others, those like you, don't. You see things. I don't see ghosts, if that's what you mean. No, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But you see the way others don't. I should have walked away. Instead, I asked, and what do you see, Arya? She stared at me for a long moment. A crossroads. A girl with fire in her blood and shadows on her heels. I exhaled. You sound like my pen pal. Arya's eyes flickered. The one who writes in violet ink. My stomach twisted. How do you know that? She tilted her head, like a bird sensing a coming storm. Because he's looking for you. And he's not far. I went home that evening clutching a small book Mira had pressed into my hands, some old Turkish poet retranslated into English. You might like it, she said, and I didn't know if she meant me or the girl whose body I now occupied. Back in my room, I flipped through it mechanically, but my mind was elsewhere. A new letter sat on my desk. I hadn't heard the mail, hadn't seen anyone deliver it. But there it was, waiting like a dare. Leora, they don't deserve your trust. They wear kindness like masks, but I see what they are beneath. They fear you not because you're weak, but because you're not one of them. Not fully. I can offer you something better. Not just safety. Understanding. Truth. Say the word, and I will come to you. See, I dropped the letter and paced the room, heart hammering. Was he watching me? Was he always watching? Part of me wanted to scream. The other part, the terrifying part, wanted to write back. Instead, I grabbed a pen. Dear C. You talk about truth like it's a gift you can hand out, but I see what you are. You want something from me, and I don't know what. Maybe I'm just a puzzle you haven't solved. Maybe I'm the only color left in your world. But I'm not yours. Not now. Not ever. Leora. I didn't know if I meant it, but I sealed the letter anyway. That night, I dreamed again. Not of blood. Of him. He stood on a balcony of dark stone overlooking a ruined city that shimmered beneath moonlight. His face was sharper than memory, ancient, aristocratic, cruel in its beauty. His eyes, those gray, empty eyes, locked on mine with hunger and sorrow both. You've always belonged with me, he whispered. I don't belong to anyone. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We'll see. Chapter to the eyes that see. The next morning, I saw my first vampire. And no, he didn't sparkle. He stood in the shadows between the library's ivy-covered columns, where the light didn't quite reach. He was tall to pale for someone allegedly alive, and his eyes cold, silver-gray, locked on me with surgical precision. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. I blinked, he was gone. At first, I thought I imagined him, maybe a dream leak, a side effect of sleep deprivation and too much poetic drama. But when I walked inside, Elias Ashbourne stood by the front desk, spine straight as a ruler, and said, "You saw him, didn't you?" My stomach dropped. Saw who? "You shouldn't come here alone," he said, ignoring the question. His voice was monotone, clipped, like language was beneath him. Some boundaries haven't been reinforced yet. Right, I said slowly. Because clearly there's a vampire turf war happening in the non-fiction aisle. His expression didn't change, but I felt something, a pulse of irritation. Alarm? I wasn't sure. His face remained as lifeless as porcelain, but my instinct screamed danger. Your mind, he said, isn't like others. Gee, thanks. You resist me. I stared at him, blood chilling. You tried to get into my head? His silence was confirmation. I took a step back. Next time, ask. Or better yet, don't. You've been marked, Elias said, suddenly closer than he should have been. That's why they're watching you. They as in. He didn't answer, but his eyes flickered toward the window. I turned, and for a split second, I saw movement in the trees, like a cloak trailing into shadow. Back at the Ashbourne house that evening, the energy was different. Mira tried to distract me with roasted eggplant and sesame noodles, but the tension at the table crackled like static. Elias remained quiet, though his gaze never quite left me. Arya, on the other hand, was restless, fingers twitching against her glass, lips slightly parted like she was debating whether to spill some prophecy. And then there was Silas. He sat at the head of the table like an anchor holding the entire family together. Calm, immovable, but watchful. I felt it the way his gaze lingered just long enough on my wrists, on my throat, like he was checking for something unseen. When I dropped my fork, it was Julian who bent to pick it up. Our fingers brushed, and for a second my heart kicked like a wild horse. His eyes, blue-green and unusually warm, met mine, and I felt nothing. No warning, no hunger, just sadness. You okay? He asked softly. I'm fine, I lied. I felt a spike. Fear. From you. Elias, I said under my breath. Julian frowned. He shouldn't have. Then he stood and said nothing more. Later, Arya cornered me near the greenhouse. He's coming, she whispered. Who? I asked, even though I already knew. Calum. I exhaled sharply. You know who he is? She nodded. Rick Doyle doesn't exist. He's one of the Triarchs. One of the three who rule the Elarian. Of course he is, I muttered. Because my life wasn't complicated enough. He sees color through you, she said, as if that explained anything. It's not love the way you understand it. It's something older. Obsessive. He won't stop. And you're all just what? Letting him hunt me down like a haunted Faberge egg. Arya's face tightened. Silas is trying to protect you. But the Elarian, they don't follow normal laws. They have their own. I'm not one of them. You're not entirely not one of them either. Her words hung in the air like ice. That night, the dream returned, but this time, I wasn't passive. I was standing in a stone corridor with torches flickering along the walls. I could hear music playing in the distance, slow, haunting, like it came from some ancient instrument tuned to sadness. At the end of the corridor stood Calum. He looked the same, tall, sleek, and terrifyingly beautiful. His presence pulled at something deep inside me, something not entirely human. "You wrote back," he said. "It wasn't an invitation." His head tilted slightly. "You deny what you are, but your soul betrays you." I stepped forward, defiant. "You don't know me. I knew you before your first breath," he said, voice soft like silk over a blade. "You've lived and died more than once. You always return to me." I felt my knees shake, but I stayed upright. "Then maybe next time, don't let me go." He blinked, and for a moment he looked human. "Wounded. I never wanted to," he said. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, and found a note taped to my window. No envelope this time, just the ink bleeding through paper, written in his hand. "I'm close, Leora. Your truth waits beneath Ravenwood. Let me show you who you really are." I didn't scream. I didn't even tear it up. I just folded it into the poetry book and whispered to the night, "Come if you dare." The next morning, Eleanor cornered me in the hallway. She hadn't said much since I arrived, quiet and pale, like she'd been dipped in moonlight and forgotten by the sun. Her eyes, though, were sharp, too sharp. "You walk in your sleep," she said flatly. I blinked at her. "That's creepy. And weird. Also untrue." "You were outside last night," she insisted, "standing barefoot in the garden, talking to someone." I laughed, dry and skeptical. Unless that someone was a pine tree or the ghost of my past therapist, I doubt it. Her gaze didn't waver. "You said his name." "Whose name?" "Calum." The humor drained from my face like blood. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the like rumbled before it could form. "You saw him." "No," she said softly, "but I felt him, just like I felt you weren't really gone in that crash." A chill spittered down my spine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not the only one who's different." She hesitated. "And because if he's really coming, you need to be ready." I spent the afternoon at the Ashbourne estate, pretending to be normal. Mira handed me a mixing bowl and let me stir rice batter for pancakes that tasted like springtime and nostalgia. Arya wandered in occasionally, her eyes distant, distracted by visions I could only guess at. Julian sat in the living room with a book he never turned a single page of. And then there was Silas. He invited me into his study for tea, yes, actual tea steeped in hand-painted porcelain like we were in some Regency drama, and gestured to the chair across from him. "You've seen him, haven't you?" he asked gently. I didn't pretend. "Yes." Silas studied me, his fingers folded neatly. "He's not like others. Even among our kind, Calum is particular." "Possessive, you mean?" His mouth twitched. "I mean dangerous. He survived eras most of us only read about. His world is order. Control. You threaten that just by existing." "Lovely," I muttered. "I always wanted to be someone's cosmic inconvenience." Silas's eyes crinkled. "You're more than that." "Because I'm his color vision vending machine." "Because you are Leora," he said firmly. "And that name carries weight beyond what you remember." I tilted my head. "Are you saying I've been here before?" "You were never entirely gone." He didn't elaborate. That evening, I finally returned to the letters. I pulled out every note C had sent me over the years, spreading them across my bedroom floor like sacred artifacts. They spanned a decade, carefully penned words filled with longing, cryptic metaphors, and emotional intimacy so raw it felt like reading someone else's heartbeat. But the one that caught my attention was dated 6 months before the accident. "Do you ever wonder if you were meant to die? If maybe this world wasn't ready for what you are? I've waited so long to find you again. Each time you return, I lose a little more of myself. But I will not lose you this time. Not again." I stared at the line for what felt like hours. Not again. So this had happened before, somehow. In some other life. Maybe I hadn't just been reborn, I'd been retrieved. I snuck out after midnight. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was the letters, maybe the dreams, or maybe the voice in my head that whispered he's watching. And part of you doesn't want him to stop. The night air bit at my skin, and the trees shivered like they knew something I didn't. Ravenwood wasn't asleep, it was listening. The silence was heavy, thick with intent. I followed the road behind the Rourke house until the trees swallowed the pavement. There beneath an old oak tree stood a man, tall, dressed in a tailored coat that somehow looked ancient and impossibly modern at the same time, and his eyes, grey, not cold this time, but alive, lit with fire and something wild. "Leora," Calum said, as if the name itself were a prayer. Or a curse. My breath caught. "You're not supposed to be here." He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "You wrote to me. For years. Letters aren't permission. No, he murmured. But they are proof that some part of you remembers. I'm not yours, I said. I had to say it. Whatever past lives we had, I'm someone else now. He studied me like I was a puzzle wrapped in silk. You're exactly who you've always been. The world changes. You do not. Convenient. He stopped a foot away, and I could feel the cold radiating off him like moonlight over a grave. But it wasn't fear that pulsed through me. It was recognition. You still see color when you look at me? I asked, voice unsteady. He nodded. Only you. Always you. My heart rebelled. That's obsession, not love. He leaned in, his voice brushing against my skin like frost. Then let me be obsessed. Let me burn, if it means I can see you. I could feel it now, his power, pulsing beneath the surface like a storm in chains. He could force me to come with him, compel me. But he didn't. I won't turn, I said quietly. I'd rather die human than live as a shadow. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Then we'll find another way, he said. And before I could respond, he vanished into the darkness, leaving behind only the scent of winter and the echo of my name in the trees. Chapter 3: Secrets in the Blood. I didn't tell Chief Rook I'd seen Calum. I didn't tell Eleanor, or Arya, or anyone. Not because I trusted him, don't be absurd, but because the moment I woke up, I realized something terrifying. I wanted to see him again. And that, in itself, was enough to make me question everything. My memories, my identity, my soul. Breakfast was awkward. Dean sat across from me reading the newspaper upside down, pretending not to study the dark circles under my eyes. Eleanor stirred her oatmeal like she was casting a spell. The whole house vibrated with unspoken tension, as if someone had tampered with its foundations during the night and now everyone was pretending the walls weren't leaning sideways. You didn't sleep, Dean said finally. I did. Just unevenly. You look like you wrestled your nightmares and lost. I stabbed a strawberry with unnecessary force. Maybe I did. His gaze sharpened. Leora, if something's wrong. Everything's always wrong, I said, standing abruptly. That's the baseline now. He let me leave. That was the worst part. He didn't stop me. He just watched the way someone watches a wave pull back before its tsunami. At the Ashbourne estate, Arya met me with a grim expression and a thermos of jasmine tea. You saw him. It wasn't a question. I dreamt of him, I lied. She raised a brow. You smell like his aura. Like dust and rain and iron. You were in his presence. You make it sound like I stepped into the Vatican. She looked away. To him, you are the Vatican. I scowled. What does that even mean? Calum isn't driven by impulse. He doesn't act without reason. But he's also not bound by human ethics. If he sees something as his, it is his. Well, someone should tell him that's not how consent works. He knows, Arya said softly. He just doesn't care. Silas didn't speak when I entered his study. He merely gestured to the chair across from him and handed me a thin file. Old paper, handwritten notes, diagrams, medical charts. Is this supposed to scare me? I asked. No, he said. It's to help you understand. The top page showed an EEG scan. Next to it was a transcription of psychic resistance tests. My name Leora Wen was scrawled at the top. Except it wasn't in English. It was in Latin. This was recorded before your rebirth, Silas said. Your mind resisted all intrusion. Even ours. I flipped through the pages. There were notes from Mira, sketches of Seidel's Arya had seen in her visions, and a single phrase repeated over and over in different handwriting. She sees what is true. Why me? I asked. Why am I different? Because you were never meant to forget who you are. I stared at him. What does that mean? Silas leaned forward, voice gentler now. You died in another world. That part is true. But your soul chose to return to this world. And it didn't come alone. The hairs on my neck rose. What did I bring with me? He didn't answer. Later that afternoon, Mira invited me into the sunroom for what she called a talk. Her version of talking involved handing me lemon cake and pretending it was therapy. I know it's hard to trust us, she said, slicing carefully. But we're trying to protect me from Calum. She paused. From everything he represents. That includes me now, doesn't it? Her eyes softened. It doesn't have to. I took the smallest bite of the cake. It tasted like memories I didn't have. Do you think I'm going to turn? I asked. She didn't answer. And in the silence, I realized what they all feared. It wasn't that Calum would take me. It was that I might go willingly. That evening, I took the long way home. through the woods, past the stream that glittered under moonlight like something enchanted and vaguely dangerous. I should have turned back the moment I heard the leaves rustling behind me, but I didn't, because part of me knew who it was. He didn't speak when he appeared, just stepped out from the shadows like they were his natural skin. His eyes were softer this time, and somehow more terrifying because of it. "Are you going to keep doing this?" I asked. "I came to give you something." He held out a ring. A simple silver band, ancient in its design, set with a single black opal that shimmered in colors I couldn't name. "I don't want gifts." "It's not a gift," he said. "It's protection." "From who?" "From them," he said quietly. "Even the Ashbourness. Especially the Elarian. As long as you wear it, they can't compel you. Not even Elias." I narrowed my eyes. "Why would you give me something that makes it harder for you to control me?" "Because I want you to choose me," he said, almost bitterly. "And I know you won't if I become what you fear." I stared at the ring. I didn't reach for it. "I don't trust you," I said. He didn't flinch. "Then start by trusting that I'll never lie to you." "How noble of you," I muttered, and turned away. But I took the ring, and slipped it into my pocket. The ring burned cold in my pocket. Even without wearing it, I felt it like a pulse against my thigh, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Or maybe it was echoing mine. Caleb's promise that I would be immune to psychic compulsion while wearing it rang louder in my ears than I wanted it to. I didn't trust him, but I trusted even less the fact that I was starting to believe him. Back at the Rourke house, I tucked the ring beneath the floorboard in my closet, not because I feared it would be stolen, but because if I kept it close, I knew I'd wear it. And if I wore it, I'd admit I wanted Caleb's protection. And if I wanted his protection, well, that was a door I wasn't ready to walk through. I showed up at the Ashbourness the next morning, uninvited and uncaffeinated, which was its own kind of crime. Julian was in the garden, pruning roses like he didn't have enough darkness under his eyes to qualify as a horror movie extra. When he saw me, he actually smiled, a rare and fleeting thing, like seeing a solar eclipse or Elias blink twice. "You shouldn't be alone right now," he said. "Yeah, well," I replied, stepping carefully between the ivy. "My list of companions has grown complicated." He gestured toward the bench beside him, and I sat, close enough to feel his energy hum under the surface. Julian always felt too tightly wound, like emotion barely tethered by skin. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "Which part?" "That he came to you. That he touched you." I stiffened. "Who told you that?" "Arya saw it." "Of course she did." Julian didn't look at me. Instead, he snipped a rose with clinical precision. "Did he hurt you?" "No, but he could have." I watched his hands tremble ever so slightly. "You're angry." "I'm protective," he said. "There's a difference." I laughed bitterly. "Not always." Julian turned to me then, and I saw it, real worry. Not fear of Caleb, but fear for me. That I might fall into something I couldn't climb back out of. Or worse, wouldn't want to. "You don't know what it's like," he said softly, "to feel someone's hunger for you. Not love. Hunger. You can't tell where it begins or ends." My hand drifted unconsciously to my pocket. Empty. The ring still hidden. Julian's gaze narrowed. "He gave you something, didn't he?" I hesitated too long. "I'm not wearing it," I snapped. "If that's what you're about to accuse me of." "He doesn't give gifts," Julian said. "He gives traps." Maybe I'm tired of being everyone else's fragile human puzzle piece. "You think being strong means letting him in?" Julian's voice cracked. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Leora. Least of all to him." I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure he was wrong. Inside, Arya waited with a blanket and a strange look in her eyes. "You're unraveling," she said, placing the fabric around my shoulders like I was made of frost. "The threads of your old life are loosening. Was I ever really stitched together to begin with?" She tilted her head. "You are not who you were, and not yet who you'll become. That's dangerous. You're uninsured. And Caleb wants to anchor me." Her silence said yes. "I had a vision," Arya said after a pause. "You were standing in a ring of fire. Everyone tried to reach you. No one could." I frowned. "That's encouraging." "You weren't burning," she added. "The fire was you." That night I couldn't sleep, not because of nightmares, but because I wanted to dream. I wanted to see him. It scared me, but the pull was undeniable. I sat by the closet door for a long time before lifting the floorboard. The ring was still cold, still beautiful, still humming with restrained energy. I slid it onto my finger without ceremony, and suddenly, everything shifted. The silence deepened. The room's colors grew vibrant. My senses sharpened like someone had removed a veil from the world. I could hear a cricket breathe. And then footsteps. Behind me. I turned sharply, nothing. Just my reflection in the mirror. Except, in the mirror my eyes were not my own. The next day, Elias confronted me. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He just appeared in the raucous living room like a glitch in reality, staring at me with unblinking suspicion. "You're wearing it," he said. "Good morning to you too." He stepped closer. "That ring blocks my abilities. Isn't that a good thing? It means I can't protect you. Or manipulate me." His jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you're inviting." "I didn't invite anything," I snapped. "I just stopped pretending that I'm normal." Elias leaned in. "He sees through your eyes now. That's the price, my blood child." "What?" He left a tether inside it. "Calum doesn't need to compel you. He just needs you to want him." That night I stood in front of the mirror again. This time I didn't see his eyes in place of mine. But I felt him. Waiting. Watching. And the worst part? I wasn't afraid. Chapter for Between the Worlds. If you've never heard the forest breathe, I envy you. It's not the wind. Or the rustle of leaves. It's subtler than that, a kind of exhale beneath the roots, like the earth sighing in its sleep. And when I stepped past the rusted iron arch at the edge of Ravenwood's forgotten cemetery trail, I swear the forest inhaled. "Is this really necessary?" I asked, hugging my jacket tighter. The air was damp, and the trees too quiet. Arya walked ahead of me, pale as smoke and humming under her breath. "You need to see it." "See what exactly?" "Another cryptic metaphor? A cave full of blood-sucking poetry slams?" She glanced over her shoulder, amused. "Close. But no." Behind us, Julian and Elias trailed like reluctant sentinels. Mira had warned them not to let me out of sight today. Apparently, wearing Calum's ring even intermittently had elevated me to risk factor in the Ashbourne security protocol. "So where are we going?" I pressed. Arya stopped before a knotted tree that looked like it had grown around itself in agony. She pressed her palm against the bark and whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. The trunk groaned, and a section of it slowly slid open, revealing a narrow stone passage downward. I blinked. "That's not normal." "Neither are you," Elias said coldly. "You say that like it's a compliment." He didn't reply. Arya nodded toward the opening. "This way." The descent was steep, lit only by flickering blue crystals embedded in the stone. The air grew colder with every step, but not in the physical sense. It was a soul-deep chill, the kind that made your thoughts quiet and your heart beat louder. When we reached the bottom, I expected a crypt, or a dungeon. What I found was a room carved from stone, filled with stained glass lanterns and murals painted directly onto the rock. The imagery was strange figures with golden eyes and wings made of fire, locked in war with creatures that looked human but bled black smoke. "What is this place?" I whispered. "A memory," Arya said. Julian stood beside a mosaic of a woman with hair like mine, dark, tangled, windswept, surrounded by flames. "It's older than the town. Older than the Ashbournes." Elias stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "This is where the truth lingers when the world forgets." I turned in a slow circle, my eyes catching on a figure at the far end of the chamber. A man carved into obsidian. Cloaked. Crowned. His eyes were painted the color of ash. Calum. I didn't need a nameplate. I knew it was him. "How?" I breathed. "He's always been part of it," Arya said. "This isn't just about you and him. It never was. It's older. Deeper. Cyclical." I stared at the murals, each more disturbing than the last. In one, a woman stood between two armies. In another, her face was covered by a veil of white fire. In a third, she lay dead at the feet of a throne. My stomach twisted. "That's me." "You're a pattern," Elias said. "A fixed point in a turning world." "Wonderful," I muttered. "So I'm not just reborn, I'm reused." "Repersepist," Arya said gently. "You're really bad at comfort." She smiled faintly. "That's Mira's department." I wandered away from the others, deeper into the chamber. The farther I moved, the louder the hum became. Not sound exactly, something under my skin. A vibration in my blood. There was a mirror at the far end, framed in twisted wood, its surface rippling faintly like it held a tide beneath it. When I stepped in front of it, I didn't see myself. Not as I was, anyway. The reflection wore a white cloak over bloodstained skin. Her eyes glowed gold. In one hand, she held a dagger. In the other, Calum's ring. But it wasn't on her finger. It was embedded in her chest. I stumbled back. Arya caught me. It shows what waits if nothing changes. Or what's already happened, Alaya sounded darkly. I shook my head, trying to clear the ringing in my ears. Why show me this? Because you have to choose, Julian said, stepping closer. Soon. And you need to understand what you're choosing between. Destiny, I spat. Or Calum. Arya's voice was quiet. Now between surrender and sovereignty. Back at the surface, the air tasted sweeter, like I'd returned from another life. I was shaking, but not from cold. Something inside me had shifted. Something subtle and terrible. The others walked ahead, giving me space. I didn't mind. I needed to breathe. To think. To scream into the trees. But before I could open my mouth, a voice, low and familiar, curled around me like smoke. You saw it, didn't you? I froze. Calum stood at the edge of the clearing, not quite in shadow, not quite in light. I told you not to follow me, I said, heart hammering. I didn't, he replied. You followed yourself. His eyes glittered so many shades of grey they almost made a spectrum. They showed you the chamber. The memories. Do you understand now? I understand you're part of something ancient and manipulative and wrong. I am part of you, he said simply. As you are of me. He took a step forward, but I raised my hand. Don't. He stopped. I don't need prophecy, I said, voice shaking. I need answers. Real ones. From you. He studied me, then slowly reached into his coat and pulled out a folded page. Then read this. He handed it to me like a relic. And vanished. Again. Because of course he did. I unfolded the note. There is a reason your blood resists us. There is a reason you lived when no one else did. There is a reason I cannot forget you. You are not a key. You are the door. I read the note again. And again. Each time, the words rearranged themselves in my mind, as if they wanted to be more than understood, remembered. You are not a key. You are the door. Cryptic, poetic, infuriating. I crumpled it, but my fingers wouldn't let go. My skin buzzed with something that felt like static and déjà vu. Like my bones remembered what my brain refused to. The forest around me watched in silence. By the time I returned to the Ashbourne house, dusk had swallowed Ravenwood. The trees glowed a smoky bronze, and clouds gathered like gossip above the mountain peaks. I was still holding Calum's message in my jacket pocket, where it burned against my ribs like guilt or maybe truth. Mira opened the door before I knocked. She looked relieved and exhausted. Her eyes searched my face for damage, not blood. You were gone too long. I needed air. She gave me that gentle, too wise smile. That's what people say before they jump. I followed her to the kitchen where tea was already steeping. Jasmine and bergamot. She always made it when she was worried. For me. Or maybe for herself. You've seen things, she said. You mean they showed me things? Her brow furrowed, but she didn't argue. I sat at the counter, fingers twitching around the teacup. What am I, Mira? You're still Leora, she said softly. That's what matters. But I'm not just her. No, she admitted. You're more. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be, Silas's voice said from the hallway. He stepped into the light like someone who knew he belonged there. Truth rarely is. I turned to face him. You knew about the chamber. I sealed it, he replied. I blinked. Excuse me. When we first came to Ravenwood, I found that place buried beneath wards and decay. I knew it was a tether to the old world, to the ancient bonds between your kind and ours. My kind, I repeated. You're not fully human, Leora, he said gently. You never were. My breath caught. What am I then? A vampire? A prophet? Some celestial recycling project? You're a bridge, he said. Oh good, I snapped. That clears everything up. Later that night I stood outside on the porch, trying not to hyperventilate. Stars hung above me like indifferent witnesses. Ravenwood was too still. Too quiet. My fingertips sparked. It started at the base of my palms, tiny prickles of heat, invisible yet undeniable. I stared down at my hands, willing them to stop. They didn't. Instead, something shimmered between them. A ripple in the air. As if the fabric of the world had thinned, and I had accidentally touched the hem of something divine or dangerous. I backed away, heart thudding, and that's when Arya found me. You're awakening, she said, stepping out of the shadows like a very graceful ghost. I didn't ask for this. Power doesn't wait for permission. I looked at her, desperate. What is this? You're the anchor between two truths. You were human. Now you're something else. But your soul hasn't chosen yet. Chosen what? To be the door. Or the lock. I dropped onto the steps, burying my head in my hands. Do you people rehearse this level of mysticism? She sat beside me. The door leads to the end of things. Or the beginning. I gave her a long look. You could have just said that. The next morning, a new letter arrived. But this time, it wasn't from Calum. It was from the El Arian Council. Not a note, not a threat. A formal summons. Silas opened it with me in his study, eyes narrowed behind his glasses. They want to assess your status, he said grimly. Decide what protections, if any, you're entitled to. What protections? They don't recognize you as one of them, he said. But they don't trust you as human either. Especially not now. Because of Calum. Because of what you might become. I stared at the letter, written in old El Aric script and sealed with the sigil of the Triarch. The words shimmered faintly, resisting translation unless I touched them. When I did, the parchment warmed beneath my skin, and the meaning poured into me like liquid fire. Leora Wen is hereby requested to appear before the Elarian High Seat. Her status an unturned bound is unprecedented and presents a threat to the accord. Failure to comply will be considered an act of opposition. I closed my eyes. What happens if I don't go? They'll come to Ravenwood, Silas said. And they won't come alone. That night, Calum came to me in a dream. Again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. We stood in a cathedral made of bone and glass. Light filtered through crimson-stained windows, painting the floor in bleeding colors. He wore no crown, no armor. Just a black coat and bare feet, as if he didn't want to frighten me. You're changing, he said. You knew I would. I hoped you wouldn't. That surprised me. You want me to stay human? I want you to stay you. I looked down at my hands. I'm not sure that's possible. Calum stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I swallowed. Color? No, he reached out and touched my cheek. His fingers were warm. Too warm. I see home. Something inside me broke. Not with pain, with grief. Because for the first time I realized that somewhere in the timeline of forever before the chamber, before the ring, before Ravenwood, I had loved him, and I still might. Chapter 5: The Abduction. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful, sleepy silence of Ravenwood before dawn, but the sharp, unnatural kind. The kind that hums under your skin, where the birds stop singing and even the trees seem to hold their breath. That silence whispered, you are not alone. I woke with the taste of blood and metal in my mouth. Not mine. I sat up too fast. The room was wrong air, wrong scent, wrong weight. My bed was gone. So were my books, my letters, my window view of fog-kissed pines. Stone walls, hive-altered ceiling, velvet curtains, and a fire that burned blue in the hearth. I was in a different world. And I wasn't dreaming. You're awake. His voice came from a chair in the shadows, low, steady, completely unrepentant. Calum, you abducted me, I croaked, throat raw and dry. I relocated you, he said, standing. Temporarily. Oh, well, that makes it fine then. He stepped into the firelight, and for a moment, I forgot how to be angry. His coat was undone, collar loose, and he looked unfairly like of a painting and the hero of a myth. His eyes met mine, and the room shifted around him like he bent reality with presence alone. This is Shadowspire, he said quietly. The heart of our world. I stood, swaying slightly. I didn't agree to this. I couldn't risk them deciding for you. The council was preparing to act. I was preparing to act. Calum's expression flickered, shame, maybe, or something close. You've been threatened on all sides. Even the Ashbournes don't fully understand what you are. But here, under my protection, you'll be untouchable. I crossed my arms, furious at how much part of me wanted to believe him. So you kidnapped me for my own good. That's convenient. No, he said. I brought you here because I can't stand to watch you be pulled apart piece by piece. You are not a prize to be claimed. You are a storm barely contained. And no one but me is prepared for what comes next. He gave me a tour. I didn't ask for one. But the castle or citadel or throne of horrors, depending on your perspective, refused to be ignored. Shadowspire was carved into the side of a frozen mountain, its halls glowing with torchlight that never flickered and staircases that spiraled like impossible geometry. Vampires passed us like ghosts, regal, ancient, beautiful, terrible. Some bowed. Others just watched me with thinly veiled curiosity. A few with hunger. I held my chin up, biting back the urge to run. You said I'd be safe, I muttered. They're not allowed to touch you, Calum replied. Not while you're bound to me. Bound is such a comforting word. He stopped in front of a massive stained glass window, the colors cold and sharp. It depicted a woman standing atop a battlefield, flames in her hands. Her eyes blazed gold. She wore a crown of broken iron. It was me. You've been in our prophecies for centuries, he said. I shook my head. I don't believe in fate. Neither do I. He turned to face me. But I believe in design. And there is something about your soul that refuses to stay gone. Maybe because someone keeps dragging it back. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, let me show you the library. The Shadow Spire library made the Ashbourne-esque private collection look like a little free library box in a sleepy suburb. It stretched underground for miles, rows of tomes glowing faintly, bound in leather, glass, and metal. I could hear the rustle of pages before we entered, like the books were breathing. This is where you'll find your answers, Calum said. Not from Arya's visions or Silas's science. From history. Your history. I stepped inside, stunned. The air vibrated with forgotten knowledge. Every instinct in me said I didn't belong here. But another voice whispered, you've been here before. Calum placed a book in my hands. It was old. Too old. The leather cracked at my touch. On the cover, scrolled in silver, Lyra. My name. Or a version of it. I opened it. And gasped. Painted on the first page was a portrait of a woman with my face older, harder, radiant. In her eyes fury. In her hands fire. Behind her stood 3 shadowed figures, one with eyes the color of ash. Calum. Is this supposed to convince me? I whispered. No, he said. It's supposed to remind you. That night I sat in a guest chamber too grand to feel real, staring at a fire that burned without wood. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because for the first time I wasn't sure who I was trying to protect. Myself from Calum. Or Calum from me. I wore the ring again. I told myself it was for defense. A shield against influence. But I could feel him through it. Not his voice, not his will, just a quiet presence. Like a heartbeat pressed against mine. He didn't come to me. Not yet. But I knew he would. And worse. I wasn't sure I'd stop him. The second day in Shadow Spire was worse than the first. Not because I was mistreated, on the contrary. The place ran on a level of opulence that bordered on absurd. Silken robes, a wardrobe curated in my exact measurements, which was creepy. Food that looked too perfect to be real. And yet, it all rang hollow. This wasn't comfort. This was a cage with velvet trim. I wandered the upper halls alone, trailed always by a silent guard whose eyes never left me. I named him Stairwamic Fang Face in my head, because I was losing it, and sarcasm was still my emotional life raft. Every corner of the citadel pulsed with history, and danger, and the weight of knowing not facts, but memory. Like the walls remembered lives that had screamed here, bled here, chosen here, and I was just the next page in the saga. Calum found me in the Tower Gardens. I say gardens, but really, they were a series of terraces suspended between spires, overflowing with silver-leaved trees, white roses that bloomed under moonlight, and vines that pulsed faintly as if listening to nearby heartbeats. It was beautiful, haunting, and completely unnatural. I'm not a guest here, I said without looking at him. Let's stop pretending. You're not a prisoner either, he replied, stepping beside me. Not unless you choose to be. Oh, how generous. He looked at me then, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. You think this is about power, about ownership. But it's never been that. Then what is it about, Calum? I turned to him, anger rising like bile. Why bring me here? Why rip me away from the only people I've trusted since I woke up in this body? Because they want to mold you, he said, voice low. To keep you human, because it makes them feel safe. But you're not. You're so much more. I narrowed my eyes. You think they're trying to limit me and you're not? He shook his head. I'm trying to free you. His conviction was terrifying. Because he believed it. Absolutely. I don't want to become what you are, I said, barely above a whisper. Calum's jaw tightened. You already aren't what you were. I'm trying to be. He stepped closer. You're trying to fit into a world that will never accept you completely. Maybe I don't need to be accepted by anyone, I snapped. Maybe I just want to live my life without being someone's prophecy or obsession or queen. His face softened, and for the first time since he took me he looked tired. You were never a queen in my eyes, he said. You were a beginning. He led me to a different wing of the citadel, that night lined with statues and echoes. It felt older than the rest of Shadow Spire. Raw, undisturbed. At the end stood a chamber door inscribed with ancient runes. Calum pressed his palm against it. It opened silently, revealing a small room with a single pedestal. On it lay a mirror framed in obsidian and bone. "What is this?" He didn't answer right away, just gestured. I approached it carefully. The mirror shimmered before showing my reflection. Only it wasn't me. Not exactly. She had my face, my eyes, but older, more regal. Her expression was calm, proud, terrifyingly certain. "She was the first," Calum said behind me. "The first soul to carry your name. Your flame. Every version of you has echoed her." I stared at the reflection. It didn't mimic my movements. She just stared back, unwavering. "She burned the old empire," Calum said. "Ended a 1,000-year reign of darkness. She did what none of us could. Not even me." I turned to him. "So what you think I'm her reincarnation?" "I think you are her continuation." I laughed, bitter and cold. "So I'm not even a person anymore, just a sequel." "She chose to die to reset the balance," he said softly. "And you were born to decide if that sacrifice was worth it." I stared at the mirror again, and for the first time, felt something deep in my chest take lick. Not understanding, not agreement, but recognition. I knew her. Because I was her. In some far corner of my soul, the fire still lived. Back in my chambers I paced. My thoughts spun like wheels in a storm. The mirror. The mural. The book with my name. None of it made sense, and all of it made too much sense. My whole life, even before the car crash, I'd felt other. Like I was living on borrowed time. Borrowed identity. Now I was being told I was the reincarnation of some fire-wielding revolutionary with the power to destroy worlds or save them, and that the only person who truly believed in me was a vampire tyrant with a color addiction and a savior complex. Perfect, and still part of me wanted to stay. Not because I forgave him, not because I trusted him, but because something inside me belonged here. In the silence I whispered to myself, "You are the door," and suddenly, I felt it. A pressure in the air. A presence. Not Calum. Something older. The walls trembled. And I knew. The El-Arian Council had arrived, and they were not here for peace. Chapter 6 Trial of the Unturned. They called it the Hall of Judgment, but it felt more like a cathedral designed by someone who hated comfort. Shadow Spire's innermost chamber was all stone and shadow, lightless despite the chandeliers that hung like skeletal chandeliers overhead. The marble floor reflected no image, just distortion. Like even the ground refused to remember what walked upon it. I stood alone in the center of the room, not by choice, surrounded on three sides by thrones carved from obsidians at the tri-arcs of the El-Arian Council. The room pulsed with their power and old, heavy pressure like the gravity of a dying star. To the left was Lady Solvini, a creature of elegance so sharp it cut the air around her. Her eyes were violet glass, unreadable and cruel. To the right, Marquis Athros, taller than any man I'd seen, his skin etched with silver veins, his breath cold enough to mist. And in the center, Calum. He wore black again. Of course he did. His posture was perfect, hands folded over his knee like he wasn't moments away from deciding my fate. His expression was unreadable. But his eyes? They burned. Not with rage. With need. A need he hadn't tried to hide in weeks. I wanted to spit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear every stone from this place and ask if this was what power looked like, because it felt like suffocation. But instead, I stood, head high. Barefoot, because apparently shoes are forbidden before the tri-arch, and I quote, "The truth must stand in armature." I was tempted to add, tell that to Calum's emotional repression, but I digress. "Leora, when," Solvini said, her voice a cold ribbon, "you stand before us as a living contradiction. A human soul in possession of sovereign fire. Explain this." "I don't know how it happened," I said evenly. "I only know that I woke up in the body of a girl who should have died, and now everyone seems to think I'm a threat." "She resists compulsion," Ethros murmured. "Even the Triarch cannot pierce her will." "I'd thank you for the compliment," I said, "but you people don't seem big on appreciation." Calum's lip twitched, just barely. "We did not summon you here for debate," Solvini said sharply. "Then what?" A sentence. I took a step forward. "You want me to become like you? That's what this is about. Turn or perish." "Perish?" Ethros repeated, intrigued. Calum's voice cut through like a blade. "No." Solvini turned to him. "You abstain from judgment." "I invoke the ancient clause," he said, standing. "Under El-Arian law I have claimed the right of protection. She may not be turned, harmed, or held without cause. Gasps echoed around the hall. Whispered outrage, disbelief. She is unclaimed, Salvini said coolly. She is sponsored, Calum corrected. That word. It hit harder than it should have. Because it wasn't just a legal shield, it was a mark. An acknowledgement. I was now under Calum's direct protection. My skin crawled. And yet, I was still grateful. Because the council visibly recoiled. Their power couldn't touch me. Not while his bond protected me like a wall of fire. But I wouldn't let him own the moment. I didn't ask for your protection, I said, loud enough to echo. You needed it, he replied, soft and deadly. I don't belong to you. No, Calum agreed, eyes meeting mine across the dark. You never have. That's why I fear you. The triarchs recessed, retreating behind their veil of obsidian to deliberate, which I translated as squabble like ancient siblings over how best to control the chaos I represented. I sat alone on the cold floor, waiting, thinking, trying not to cry, because beneath all the fire and defiance, I was still a girl who'd woken up in a stranger's body, stolen from her town, stripped of her choices. I missed Mira's tea. I missed Eleanor's quiet presence. I even missed Elias's stone-faced lectures, and yet I didn't regret standing here. Because for once, I had chosen. Not them. Not Calum. Me. After what felt like hours, the triarchs returned. Salvini stirred. The council has reached a verdict. I braced. You are an anomaly, neither fully mortal nor willingly turned. By precedent, you should not exist. Great. Love a good existential invalidation. You are hereby granted protected status under Elarian law, she continued. You may remain human, but only under strict conditions. I frowned. What kind of conditions? You will remain under sponsorship. You may not leave Shadowspire without permission. You will not act against the council's interests. And should you attempt to turn or bear offspring, your protection will be revoked. My blood ran cold. I never agreed to any of that. You accepted sponsorship, Ethros said. That is agreement. I looked to Calum, furious. You knew. I bought you time, he said. Nothing more. You caged me to keep me alive. I freed you from the alternative. After the trial, I was escorted back to my chambers by a silent guard whose name I didn't know, and who flinched when I looked at him. Because now, they feared me, and that terrified me more than anything. Not because I wanted to be feared, but because part of me liked it. I didn't speak to Calum for the rest of the day. He didn't try to speak to me either. It was a standoff wrapped in velvet, steeped in tension, and perfumed with unspoken things neither of us dared to name. Not yet. I spent most of the afternoon in the tower library, pacing, reading, not reading. Mostly pretending I was fine while my insides unraveled thread by thread. So this was my life, now legally protected, politically owned, existentially disqualified. There were words for women in cages that shimmered like thrones. And I didn't want to be one of them. By nightfall I couldn't take the silence anymore. I found Calum in the west wing of Shadowspire, standing on a terrace that overlooked the frozen mountains. The stars above were impossibly close, brighter than in Ravenwood. Like the sky knew it was being watched by gods. He didn't turn when I approached. You could have let them kill me, I said. I could have, he replied. You could have let me fight. He looked at me then. You would have lost. You don't know that. I do, because I'm not strong enough. No, he stepped toward me, and his voice dropped. Because you haven't chosen yet. You don't know what you are. Until you do, you are vulnerable. To you? His eyes burned. Always to me. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding with something tangled: fear, anger, longing. Why did you really bring me here? I told you. No, I shook my head. You gave me just enough truth to feel generous. But you're hiding something. Always. He didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, do you remember the night we first met? I blinked. Which version of me? Any of you, he said. All of you. I was silent. Because maybe I did. Not clearly. Not with words. But with sensation, with heat, a flicker of gold behind my eyes, a memory of standing in a garden made of flame, and him reaching for me through the ash. I think I've always known your voice, I said softly. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath on my cheek, and I've never stopped listening for yours. The air between us crackled, and suddenly I couldn't tell if I wanted to shove him or kiss him or scream in his face until the walls shattered, maybe all three. You say I'm free, I said. But you treat me like a symbol, a prophecy, a piece of yourself you lost. He nodded. You're right. That stopped me. Wait, you're not going to argue? He moved even closer until the ring on my hand began to hum against his proximity. I am selfish, he said. I love you in a way that threatens the world I helped build. But I won't lie about that. I want you near me. Always. I stared at him. You call that love? No, he said. I call that truth. Love is something I've only learned from you. His hand reached out slowly, giving me time to flinch, to run, to say no. I didn't. He brushed his fingers along my temple, and for a second I felt him not just physically but emotionally. Pain, centuries of it. Loneliness so absolute it had calcified into obsession. The desperate hope that if he could hold me close enough, long enough, he might find something worth saving in himself. And then buried beneath it all was awe. At me. Not who I used to be. Not who I might become. But me as I was. Now my throat tightened. I'm not turning, I said, voice raw. I will never become like you. I know. And I won't be your queen. Your symbol. Your eternal echo. You don't have to be. He leaned in, barely touching my forehead with his. I just want you to stay. I left him on the terrace. Not because I didn't want to stay, but because I needed to remember who I was without him watching. Back in my chambers, the fire was low. My reflection in the tall mirror shimmered faintly. I looked older tonight, worn, but something in my eyes had changed. Resolve, and just beneath it power. I touched the ring. It didn't burn this time. It pulsed, as if acknowledging something. A shift. Something had passed between us tonight. Not surrender, but understanding, and that was far more dangerous. Hours later I woke to a flicker in the dark. A presence in the room. Not Calum. Something else. It hovered near the door, barely visible, like smoke shaped into a man. Eyes glowing like coals. Teeth too long. Hunger wrapped in elegance. He bowed mockingly. I heard you at the door, he whispered. Let's see if you know what you're keeping locked. And then he lunged. Chapter 7. Fire beneath skin. The intruder struck with speed unnatural even for vampires. He was already halfway across the room before I could draw breath, fangs bared, arms outstretched, no pretense of negotiation, just intent. I didn't have time to scream. But I didn't need to, because something inside me woke. A wave of heat surged through my veins, hot and sharp like liquid glass. My vision narrowed to a single point, his glowing red eyes, and then everything exploded. Not the room. A ring of fire burst outward from where I stood. Not real firelight force, a raw surge of something ancient and furious. It slammed into him like a war of divine judgment. He screamed a sound not made for human ears and was flung backward into the stone wall with enough force to crack it. I gasped, stumbling as the energy ebbed from my limbs. My knees hit the ground, breath ragged, arms shaking. The air smelled like scorched ash and metal. The vampire, or whatever he'd been, late, witching in the ruins of a Chateau d'Amour. His cloak had burned away, revealing skin marked with sidles I didn't recognize. Black ichor trickled from his nose. He smiled through broken teeth. Just like her, he whispered. And then disintegrated into smoke. Guards burst through the door seconds later, too late, of course. Calum wasn't among them. But Julian was. He stopped at the threshold, saw the singed stone and scorched floor, and went still. His eyes darted to me, wide with something between wonder and terror. I didn't mean to, I stammered. You shouldn't have been able to, he said quietly. Do what? He stepped carefully into the room, like it might still explode. That was primal defense magic. Untrained. Instinctive. I shook my head. I didn't cast a spell. I just reacted. That was the spell. Calum arrived moments later. He didn't ask questions. He didn't scold. He didn't speak. He just looked at me. And when our eyes met, the pressure in the room changed. He wasn't angry. He was afraid. Not of me. For me. They moved me to a different wing after that one, shielded by runes and guarded around the clock. I protested, of course. Loudly. But Mira's voice when she arrived was the only one I couldn't argue with. You're not safe, she said, stroking my hair like I was still the little girl she'd fed dumplings to in Ravenwood. Not from others. And not from yourself. I didn't choose this, I whispered. I know. Her eyes were soft. But now you have to choose what you do with it. That night, Calum called for me. I almost didn't go. But something in me was done running. I found him alone in a hall of mirrors, one of Shadow Spire's most arcane places. The glass along the walls shimmered faintly, each one reflecting a version of the world that never was. Dreams. Nightmares. Maybe both. He stood at the center, hands clasped behind his back, posture to still. I should have killed him, he said quietly. Who was he? An Aryan defector. A believer in the old bloodlines. The ones who think you're a weapon forged to destroy the council. Well, they're not entirely wrong. His eyes flicked toward me. He mocked you. What? He strode forward, lifted my wrist, and turned it palm up. There, barely visible under my skin, was a glowing sigil, thin, pale, pulsing faintly like ink made from moonlight. What is it? I asked. A binding mark, he said grimly. He meant to trigger your transformation. Bypass your will. My blood ran cold. But he didn't. No, because your soul rejected it. Because I'm protected by your ring. Because you're stronger than they realized. Calum looked at me, then truly looked. Stronger than I realized. I pulled my hand away. Is that what you wanted? For me to be a weapon you couldn't control? No, he said. I wanted you to survive. I still do. I backed away. You don't get to keep deciding what survival looks like for me. He nodded, slowly. Then tell me what it looks like. I opened my mouth and hesitated. Because I didn't know. Not anymore. Later, I sat alone by the mirror in my new chamber. I didn't recognize myself. Not just in the metaphorical way. My eyes had changed. They shimmered faintly with gold beneath the brown. My skin held a warmth like embers under flesh. The girl who'd woken up in Ravenwood was still there, but she was standing beside a door. One only she could open. The next morning, a letter arrived. No seal. No signature. Just a single line, scrawled in ancient ink. They know what you carry. And they're coming. The letter wouldn't stop burning in my mind. They know what you carry. The words echoed louder than any prophecy or council verdict. Louder than Calum's voice. Louder than my own thoughts. Because deep down, I knew what they meant. I just hadn't been ready to admit it. Mira came to me at dawn. No one had summoned her. No one had spoken a word. But she arrived wrapped in a pale shawl and silence, eyes soft with knowing. She took one look at my face and said, I brought tea. I sat across from her at the small table in the window alcove, staring out at the distant peaks. She poured jasmine, added 2 drops of honey the way she always did, and waited for me to speak. I didn't. Instead, I lifted the cup, sipped, and finally said, something's wrong. Wrong how? She asked gently. Wrong in the wrong way, I whispered. I can feel it in my body. Like I'm glowing from the inside, and it won't stop. She reached across the table and took my hand, pulse steady, fingers warm. May I? I nodded. She closed her eyes, and gasped. It was a quiet sound, but not small. It sucked the oxygen out of the room. When she pulled her hand back, her fingers trembled. How long? She asked. I don't know, I said. Days? Weeks? Maybe since before Shadowspire. Mira looked at me like I was made of porcelain and fire. Lee, or you're pregnant. I don't remember standing. I don't remember the cup shattering against the floor or Mira calling my name. I only remember the sound of my own heart in my ears, pounding louder than reason. Pregnant. A word that didn't fit. Not with me. Not with him. Not with anything remotely possible. It's not. I began, pacing wildly. That's not possible. I'm human. He's not. That shouldn't can't happen. Mira stood slowly. It shouldn't. But it did. But we didn't. There wasn't time. We didn't. Her gaze was steady. You don't need a calendar, Leora. You need to feel it. And I did. Suddenly, wholly, terrifyingly, I felt it. A flicker of warmth in my belly. Not movement. Not life in the traditional sense. But presence. A signature in my blood that didn't belong entirely to me. I doubled over, hands on my knees. This can't be happening. It is. How is this possible? Mira hesitated. Because you're not just human. And neither is he. Calum came to me within the hour. Of course he did. He appeared at my doorway without a guard, without armor, without any of his usual theatrical cold. Just a man with death in his blood and hope in his eyes. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. Because when I looked at him, I knew he already knew. You did this, I whispered. His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I didn't think it was possible. Then why did you try? Because I couldn't help it. I stared at him, hollowed out by fear and fury. You said you wouldn't change me. You said you wanted me to stay. I still do. Then how dare you create something inside me that will? He stepped forward but stopped at the line between us. I would never harm you, he said. But you have. My voice broke. This changes everything. You knew the council wouldn't allow this. You knew what they'd do. Yes. And you still let it happen. No, he said. I didn't let it. I didn't plan it. But I won't undo it. I stared at him, shaking. You're talking about a child. I'm talking about our child. That night, the dreams returned, but they weren't memories. They were warnings. I saw fire sweeping across the mountains. I saw Mira's tear-streaked face. I saw Julian kneel in blood, clutching something too small. I saw the child wrapped in violet light, cradled in my arms, eyes already glowing with fire. And then I saw the council, standing in judgment, again. Only this time, they didn't spare me. I woke in a cold sweat. The mark on my wrist, the one the defector had left, was glowing, and beneath my skin something ancient stirred. Not Calem's power. Mine. Chapter 8. The breach. They came in silence, which was how I knew it was them. The Ashbournes didn't announce themselves. Didn't ride in with banners or demand an audience. They simply appeared at the gates of Shadow Spire in a black vehicle that gleamed like obsidian and looked entirely out of place against the ancient stone walls. Arya was the first I saw. She stepped from the car barefoot because of course she did, her long coat flaring behind her like a prophecy. Her eyes found mine immediately, and for the first time in days, I felt a return to my lungs. Behind her came Julian, jaw set, fists clenched, radiating a fury I knew was not entirely his own. Mira, calm and composed, despite the storm in her eyes. Silas, as solemn as a priest before a funeral. And Elias, who didn't look at me at all. They came like a second family, like a rescue. Even though I wasn't sure I wanted to be rescued anymore. You're glowing, Arya said, once we were alone. I'm what? Not physically, she said, spiritually. Your aura's louder than it was. That's the nicest way anyone's told me I look radioactive. She smiled faintly. You've changed. I looked down at my hands. I didn't want to. Not like this. Change doesn't ask permission. I paused. Did you see it, the baby? Arya hesitated, then nodded. In visions. In dreams. In ripples through the future. And? She exhaled. He burns too bright. He? She blinked like she hadn't meant to say it. Oh, I said softly. Of course. The council called a special session that night. I wasn't invited. It's a closed matter, Calem had said, his expression unreadable. Your name will be spoken, but your voice is not welcome. How poetic. I'd gone from anomaly to weapon to forbidden topic. I spent the evening pacing the garden terraces, shadowed by a new guard whose name I didn't bother asking. Mira found me eventually, coaxing me into a seat beside a fountain that flowed with water so still it looked like glass. They fear what you represent, she said softly. I haven't done anything. You exist. That shouldn't be a crime. It always is. Later, Julian cornered me in the corridor outside the East Tower. He didn't speak, just pulled me into a hug so sudden, so tight I gasped. His arms wrapped around me like armor. His voice, when he finally spoke, was broken and low. You should have told us. I couldn't, I whispered. I would have come sooner. You came now. He held me tighter. And I won't leave. I closed my eyes against his shoulder. They'll kill him. Or me. Or both. Not if we kill them first. I pulled back to stare at him. He was only half joking. That night, I dreamed of a door again. But this time, it was open. On one side, Shadow Spire burning, crumbling, bleeding shadows into snow. On the other, Ravenwood Hole, quiet, mourning. And in between, me holding the child. Not crying, not screaming. Just choosing. When I woke, I found Silas waiting in my chamber. He sat by the fire reading a leather-bound tome I didn't recognize. He didn't look up when I sat across from him. I need to know the truth, I said. He turned a page. Which part? All of it. He closed the book gently. Your soul has never stayed still, Leora. Each time you're reborn, the echo grows stronger. So I was always meant to come back. No, you were meant to decide. I frowned. Decide what? Whether to break the cycle. Or continue it. By having the child. He nodded. Or by letting the fire die with you. The room went still. You're saying if I don't carry this child I sever the line? Yes. And if I do? You change everything. I left him without speaking. There were too many voices in my head. Too many futures threading through my blood. I walked to the edge of the terrace where Calem had once stood and stared into the distant, ice-covered horizon. It felt like standing at the edge of a book's final page with no idea how many chapters I'd skipped to get there. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Say it, I said. I won't, Caleb replied. Because I already know what you're thinking. You made me this. No, he said. You've always been this. He stepped beside me, not touching. You once asked what I saw when I looked at you, he said quietly. But the truth is I don't see you. I frowned. I see light, he said. Too bright. Too human. Too real. You make the world unbearable. I turned to him. And you make it impossible. The council's decision came wrapped in silk and sealed with blood. Literally. A crimson ribbon bound the parchment. It's not slick with something too dark to be wax. Caleb brought it to me himself, wordless, jaw tight, like he'd been forced to carry a message carved into his own bones. I broke the seal with shaking hands. The L-Arian High Seat acknowledges the status of the unturned bound now carrying forbidden progeny. Such a child untested, uncontent, unapproved presents an existential risk to the Accord. You are hereby granted 3 options. Consent to transformation. Join the council under Caleb's guidance. The child will be born with safeguards and integrated under strict Talarian oversight. Remain human. The child will be taken into protective custody upon birth. Refuse both. You will be exiled, stripped of sponsorship, unprotected. You have 3 nights to decide. I read the letter 3 times. By the 4th, I was shaking so hard the paper slipped from my hands. Caleb caught it before it hit the floor. His fingers brushed mine. I jerked back like I'd been burned. You knew they'd do this, I said. Yes. And you let them. I tried to stop it. Not hard enough. His voice was steady, but soft. What would you have me do? Choose me. My voice cracked. Not the council. Not their laws. Not your world. Just me. His eyes closed. I already did. I didn't eat that day. Or the next. Not because I was staging a hunger strike, but because my body refused anything but water and grief. Mira stayed close, never pushing, never asking. She only rubbed my back when the tremors came, and whispered lullabies I didn't recognize but understood all the same. Arya brought me tea that night, her fingers trembling as she handed me the cup. They've already made arrangements, she said. Rooms, guards, containment spells. For the baby, I asked. For you, if you resist. I blinked. So much for protection. They fear you now. More than they fear him. I laughed, hollow and sharp. That's a first. She reached out, brushing hair from my face. What are you going to do? I don't know, I whispered. But that wasn't entirely true. Later I found Julian sparring in one of the old training halls alone, shirtless and furious. His fists collided with stone dummies enchanted to repair themselves after every blow. Sweat slicked his back, and his movements were poetry dipped in rage. I waited until he stopped panting. You'll break your knuckles, I said. He looked over, face flushed, eyes wild. Better me than them. I need you to promise me something. No. You haven't heard it yet. I don't care. He crossed to me, voice tight. Don't ask me to stand down. Don't ask me to watch this happen. I might have to leave. I'll go with you. No, you'll stay here. And protect them. He froze. That's not fair. Nothing about this is. On the second night, I went to the East Garden alone. No guards. No council. No Caleb. Just me. And the child. It was strange how quiet he was inside me. No movement. No kicks. Just a presence. A warmth that radiated outward when I placed my palm over my belly. Are you real? I whispered. Of course he was. The power pulsing through me now wasn't just mine anymore. It hummed with a new signature. Brighter. Wilder. Not evil but untamed. I'd felt it during the attack. During the trial. In every moment I'd almost lost myself and didn't. He was holding me up as much as I was holding him. We were bound, not by magic, but by choice. Even if I hadn't known it at the time. Caleb came for me at moonrise. He didn't speak at first. Just stood beside me, his presence quiet, hesitant. You know what I have to choose, I said, eyes fixed on the moon. I do. You hate it. I do. But you'll let me? He turned to face me fully. You're not mine to let. I met his gaze. But you'll fight them. Until my final breath. A pause. Then he added, almost reluctantly, and after. That night I wrote my answer. Not on parchment, not with ink, but in fire. I pressed my hand to the mirror in my chamber, whispered the name I had carried for lifetimes, and watched the flames curl across the glass. I choose neither crown nor cage. I choose the path between. I choose freedom. And the flames answered back. So be it. Chapter 9 The Shatter. The fire didn't go out. Long after my mark had cooled, after the mirror returned to glass, the flames still danced behind my ribs, quiet, contained, alive. A choice made not in anger or surrender, but in something stronger, conviction. I didn't belong to the council, or to Calum. I belonged to myself. And I would protect the child inside me on my terms, even if it burned the world down. The next morning, the council responded. They didn't bother with parchment this time. They sent soldiers. I felt them coming before anyone else. Not through psychic warning or prophetic dream, but through my bones. The mountain trembled beneath Shadow Spire. Magic warped in the holes. The air thinned. The fire in me flickered in warning. I met Calum in the war gallery. He stood before a blade mounted on the wall, black and steel-etched with a language no living tongue spoke. He didn't turn when I entered. They're not here to negotiate, I said. No, they're here to take me. He nodded. I stepped beside him. Will you let them? Now our reflections met in the cold steel of the blade. My eyes no longer looked fully human. His never had. But for one heartbeat, we looked like equals. Outside, the Ashbournes were already gathering. Julian stood at the head of the grand stairwell, flanked by Elias and Daria. Mira waited near the entrance to the lower wing, arms crossed, gaze sharp. Silas, silent as always, stood at Calum's right. Shadow Spire hadn't hosted a battle in 1,000 years. Today, it would. The council's enforcers were cloaked in white, pale and elegant like death in ceremonial robes. Their leader, a man named Vialine, stepped forward with all the arrogance of someone who thought the law and truth were synonymous. Leora Wen, he called. You stand in violation of 3 high edicts. I'm not a citizen of your court, I replied. Your laws don't apply. You are unturned, bound, and now pregnant. The child represents a threat to balance. It represents a threat to you, I said. Calum stepped forward, cloak sweeping the stones like storm clouds. She has made her choice, he said. And I stand by it. Vialion narrowed his eyes. Then you stand against Elarion. Calum smiled. It was not a kind smile. The first spell struck the citadel wall with a sound like glass shattering inside the skull. I ducked as debris exploded behind me. Arya pulled me down with surprising strength, shielding me with her body. Across the courtyard, Elias was already countering, pushing back with a blast of psychic force that sent 2 enforcers flying. Julian went straight for the front line. A blur of motion, teeth, and fury. He didn't fight clean. He fought desperate. Silas moved like water, elegant, precise, every step calculated. He didn't attack. He neutralized, redirecting energy, dismantling spells, disabling rather than destroying. And Calum unleashed. The air around him split open with each movement. His blade carved through enemy magic like it was made of light and ash. He moved with fury so silent it was reverent. And every time his eyes caught mine, he didn't waver. He fought for me, not the prophecy, not the child. Me, I didn't hide. I couldn't. Because I wasn't helpless anymore. The mark on my wrist burned to life, flaring gold as I raised my hands. Energy spilled from my fingers, wild and raw. It wasn't spell work. It wasn't training. It was instinct. The fire obeyed me. One enforcer lunged toward Arya to fast. I threw my hand up. He stopped mid-air, suspended in a halo of flame that didn't burn, but held like a verdict. He stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. You don't get to touch what's mine, I said. And released him. He dropped like a stone, still breathing. Just barely. They fell back within an hour. Even with their numbers, they hadn't prepared for this. For Calum's fury. For the Ashbournes' loyalty. For me. The gates of Shadow Spire slammed shut behind them. The mountain went still again. But nothing felt safe. Not anymore. That night, the fires across the battlements glowed red. I stood at the edge of the tower staring down at the courtyard where blood still stained the snow. Calum joined me, silent. They'll come again, I said. Yes. Next time they won't hold back. No, I won't either, I said. He turned to me, eyes unreadable. You don't have to become a weapon. I already am. He flinched. Don't say that. It's not pain that's changing me, Calum, I whispered. It's purpose. He said nothing. Because he knew I was right. The blood didn't wash away easily. Even with snow falling again, soft and steady as silence, it clung to the stones. Deep red in the cracks. A reminder that even immortal places could bleed. The Ashbourne nest ended the wounded. Julian stalked the perimeter like a caged storm. Mira mended broken bones and broken pride. Arya sat still, humming softly under her breath, her hands wrapped around her knees, and I sat alone in the war gallery, fingers still faintly glowing. I hadn't stopped shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. I wasn't afraid of what I'd done. I was afraid I'd never go back. Elias found me first. Of course it was him. He never said much. But he always knew when the silence around me wasn't the kind that needed company, it was the kind that needed truth. He didn't speak as he sat beside me on the stone bench, so I broke the quiet. You saw it, didn't you? He nodded. You didn't hesitate. I didn't know I could do that. You still don't. I looked down at my hands. There's something inside me, something ancient. And it doesn't care what I want. It cares what you choose, he said. Power doesn't have morality. People do. I looked at him, surprised. That's weirdly comforting. He smirked faintly. Don't get used to it. By dusk, the Ashbournes gathered in the council chamber Calum had once refused to use. Now, it was a war room. Maps sprawled across the table. Letters from neutral vampire clans arriving by the hour. Rumors of rebellion. Splinters forming inside the council's ranks. They're afraid of her, Elias said. They should be, Julian snapped. Silas raised a hand. They're afraid because they think she's ungoverned. She's ungoverned, Arya said. That's why she's dangerous to them. All eyes turned to me. I didn't flinch. I'm not looking for a throne, I said. I'm not asking to rule. Then what are you asking for? Mira asked gently. I took a deep breath. A way out. Julian frowned. Out of Shadowspire. Out of all of it, I said. The politics. The prophecy. The war. You can run, Elias said. I'm not running, I said. I'm rewriting. Later I found Calum in the highest spire alone, of course standing before a wall of ancient glass that overlooked the world like a god's quiet regret. You didn't kill them, I said. No, you could have. I've killed too many for less. Why not now? He turned, and the weariness in his face struck me. Because I didn't want you to see me that way, he said. I've seen you, I whispered. His expression broke. You still have hope for me. I have love for you, I said, softer now. But love isn't enough. No, he said. But it's something. I stepped closer. Will you come with me? I asked. He blinked. Where? Away. Just away. Out of this. Out of Elarian. Out of Ravenwood. Before they come again. His mouth parted. You'd leave everything? I'd leave anything, I said. For our child. For peace. Calum stared at me, as if the stars themselves had spoken. Then yes, he said. I need one more thing, I added. Anything. I need you to promise that if I ever become something monstrous, if I lose myself, you'll stop me. His voice didn't waver. I won't have to. That night, I packed nothing. There was nothing I needed but resolve. The Ashbournes didn't argue when I told them. Mira cried silently. Julian hugged me hard enough to bruise. Arya pressed something into my palm, a silver thread woven into a knot. For protection, she whispered. Silas only said, when the time comes, you'll know how to return. Elias didn't say goodbye. But he stood in the doorway for a long time after I'd gone. Calum met me at the gates. He held out his hand. I took it. Not because I trusted everything. But because I trusted this moment. This choice. We walked into the night. Not toward safety, not toward certainty, but toward freedom. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 10. The door opens. We settled in a forgotten part of the world. No name on any map. Just mist-kissed hills, a crooked old house with ivy swallowing its bones, and a sky so wide it made everything else feel small, even destiny. Calum warded the land with spells older than mountains. No one could enter unless I allowed it. For the first time since my rebirth, I woke without fear. And yet, peace felt like a borrowed coat. Warm, but not mine. The baby grew quickly. Too quickly. By the second week, my strength began to flicker. I'd stand by the window, fingers tracing the frost, and feel the child's presence burning brighter inside me. Not in pain. Not in panic. In purpose. He wasn't draining me. He was waiting. Calum brought food. Sat beside me as I read the same pages over and over. He rarely touched me unless I reached first. He knew now my silence wasn't fragility. It was strategy. I was listening. To the child. To myself. To the world. On the sixth night, I woke to find Calum watching me. Not with worry. With awe. I can hear his heartbeat, he said. I placed my hand over my belly. It's not just his. Caleb met my eyes. He's yours. Not mine. He's ours, I corrected. But I'm the one who chooses what that means. He nodded. And what does it mean? I looked out the window. That he won't be a weapon. You can't stop what he'll become. No, I said. But I can show him who to be. The child came on the eve of a storm. Rain lashed the hills. The wind howled like an omen. Magic pulsed through the earth in wild arcs. Caleb prepared the house like a soldier, shielding every wall with blood and bone. And I will, I screamed. Not from pain, from power. Because this was no mortal birth. It was a summoning. The child entered the world with a single cry that split the storm in two. He didn't weep. He didn't tremble. He opened his eyes gold bright, terrifying, and stared into mine like he remembered everything I didn't. And just like that, I wasn't afraid anymore. Caleb held him in shaking arms, whispering words in a language lost to time. I lay on the floor drenched in sweat and starlight watching them. I'd expected chaos, terror, some ancient reckoning. Instead, it was quiet, almost tender. But then the wind stopped. All at once. The air fell still, and I felt the pressure return. Like an eye opening somewhere far away. Like a hand pressing through a veil. Like the council, or something worse, had just noticed. Caleb stood slowly, child in arms, and looked to me. They're coming. I nodded. So what do we do now? He asked. I rose to my feet, fire already sparking along my skin. We opened the door. They didn't knock. They never would. The Elarian council arrived with no warning, just the scent of ice and ash curling through the trees, pressing against the wards like a rising tide. I felt them in my bones before I saw them, unwelcome memories wearing cloaks. Caleb stood beside me on the porch, our son nestled against his chest, silent and alert. No cries, just watching. They'll want him, he said. I know. They'll want you, too. I met his eyes. They can't have either. We didn't wait for them to come to us. We walked out to meet them. The clearing beyond the house crackled with cold. Mist swept low over the grass, curling around the boots of the four figures that stood like statues. Solvi, Ethros, Vialian, and behind them, one I didn't recognize. Young, female. Her eyes glowed white. A seer. They brought a seer. I stepped forward, alone now, Caleb holding back only because I asked him to. The baby's presence hummed in my chest like a second heartbeat. You came to finish this, I said. Solvi nodded. You've broken our laws, hidden an unauthorized child, aligned with a traitor. I folded my arms. You forgot survived the impossible. Ethros's voice was almost gentle. He's not safe. Not for you, I agreed. Give him to us. He'll be raised without memory, without power. He will live. You mean he'll be erased? Vialian stepped forward. You would end centuries of balance for one hybrid child. I smiled, slow, dangerous. I would end centuries of fear. The seer stepped forward, eyes wide and blind. She tilted her head toward me, and then she laughed. A high, childlike sound, pure joy. She is the door, she whispered. But the child is the key. Everyone went still. Even Caleb. What does that mean? Ethros asked sharply. The seer turned toward the council, not Lyora, and her voice deepened, distorted with vision. He will break what you've built. He will awaken what sleeps. He will love without chains. And none of you will survive it. The baby cooed in Caleb's arms. And I smiled. The first strike came from Vialian. Of course it did. A shard of cold light meant to kill. I caught it with my bare hand. It didn't even burn. I turned it in my palm and sent it back, not to harm, but to warn. It shattered the earth at his feet, flinging him backward. Solvi drew power, but Caleb was already there, sword unsheathed, eyes blazing. And then, Arya stepped into the clearing, followed by Julian, and Elias, and Silas, dressed not in robes but battle-worn armor etched with the Ashbourne crest. You're outnumbered, I said. Ethros looked around. No, he said. You're outlived. There was no battle. There didn't need to be, because for the first time, the council saw what I was, not a weapon, not a queen, not a child, but a mother. A woman who would not bend, who had died once and come back stronger, who had every right to end them, but chose not to. Solvi lowered her hands. This will not be forgotten, she said. It will be replaced, I said. She turned and vanished with the others, all except the seer. She smiled at me again, this time with something human behind her eyes. Then whispered, good luck, and followed. Back at the house, Caleb placed the baby in my arms like he was handing me a star. "He has your eyes," I said. "And your fire." We stood in silence for a moment, both knowing something, and said, "That wasn't the end," he said. "No," I agreed. "But it was our beginning." The child reached up and touched my face. Warm, curious, powerful. I kissed his forehead and held him close, whispering the words I had never heard in any of my lives, but had always longed to say. "You are free." Epilogue. Years later, they would speak of the door and the key. Some called it myth, others miracle. But in a quiet home at the edge of the world, a boy with golden eyes learned to laugh, and a woman who had died once learned to live. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe for more beautiful tales. Tap the next thumbnail to continue your journey.